Howdy my totally always Tubular gamers, we're back with, you guessed it, another video. We got another end of year video. Today I'm going to be talking about the best open world games of 2024. Now, open worlds and video games seem to go pretty hand in hand, especially nowadays. People love open world games. They want the freedom to explore and go do whatever they want, and open worlds absolutely provide that. And in 2024, we got some really awesome open world games where you get to do just that. And while there have been plenty of awesome linear level-based experiences that have come out this year, today we're really just focusing on the open world. So let's get it started, and here this list is in no particular order. Let me know down below if you agree or disagree with the games I chose. I have not played every single game in 2024. I sure have tried, but I'm certain I missed a few games here, so let me know what your favorite open world experiences were in 2024. With that, please like, share, comment, subscribe. I got the Patreon and the super thanks. Major shout out to my patrons. Thank you so much. Let's get to the games. Well, one of the first open world games to come out this year was one of the best with Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. The Yakuza Like a Dragon games are known for their open worlds. While they might not be the biggest, they have a high amount of detail and you can interact with nearly every single location. You can interact with dozens upon dozens of stores, there's plenty of civilians. These games do a great job at feeling like living, breathing open worlds, and it was going to be really interesting with Infinite Wealth since it's not in Japan. This is the first Like a Dragon game to not take place in Japan, and I was a little unsure how things were going to go, but after playing all the way through the game, oh, they did a great job with the open world. The game has a ton of detail, maybe not as much as the other games, but there is still a lot of detail in this open world, and it's actually pretty big. It's easily the biggest open world the series has ever seen. But I also think it's very well designed. It's obviously incredibly inspired by real life, and at times it feels like a one-to-one recreation of Hawaii. And I gotta say, it really is nothing short of incredible. The game looks great also. This is a really good looking open world, and there's so much to do in it. There is so much to do in this game, it's not even funny. Obviously there's the main story, where you go in and out of the open world, but there is a ton of side content in this game. There's a bunch of odd little things you can do, like where you basically work as an Uber Eats driver on a bicycle. You can go try your hand at online dating. And then there's so many just strange sub-stories in this game. Some of them even get emotional. This game arguably has the best sub-stories of any Yakuza or Like a Dragon game, and that really is saying something. Zero had some good shit. Then there's Dondoko Island, and of course the Sujimon. Collecting Sujimon and doing these battles was way more fun than I anticipated, and one reason this is also great is because of the open world. The open world really helps make this game as good as it is. Obviously the story's good, the battle mechanics are great, the soundtrack's phenomenal, and it's a good looking game. But the open world, man, it really is one of the best aspects that this game has, and if you're looking for maybe the best open world RPG of the year, it might be right here, and that actually is saying something. There were some very good open world RPGs that we'll get to soon enough. Another highly detailed open world game that came out this year was Dragon's Dogma 2. Now, the original Dragon's Dogma had a pretty small open world, but it was full of detail, and with this game, they really kind of kept the same idea. Sure, it is 3 or 4 times bigger than the original game's map, but that original game was actually pretty small. But this open world actually has a lot of detail to it. A lot of it feels very thoughtfully placed. There's plenty of hidden treasures and there's a lot to see and explore here. The open world's also very dynamic. It's one of the best aspects of Dragon's Dogma 2. Don't get it twisted, there's plenty of good things about this game. The combat's actually really nice. The pawn system is great. The game is actually rather challenging and there's some really interesting quests, but maybe my favorite aspect is that open world. I just like how it's designed. It feels very real. It feels lived in. Like, despite the fact that there's all this fantasy nonsense going on, it still feels rather realistic, and I just love how everything is placed down and how everything plays out. The open world also has a lot of stuff going on in it where monsters show up, there's plenty of other pawns walking around, there's just random events that'll happen here and there. It makes it really feel like a breathing open world that the player lives in rather than an open world that centers around the player, if that makes any sense, and I think it only serves to enhance the gameplay. Sure, the game has plenty of dull moments and the game's pretty stingy with its fast travel, and so you might get kind of sick of just running around all over the place, but sometimes when you're running around all over the place, some crazy shit might happen. All of a sudden a giant shows up and he starts fucking you up. That happened to me several times, and every single time it happened, I was just kind of shocked. I was like, whoa, holy shit, okay, hi, hello, how's it going? All of a sudden we're getting attacked, and there was plenty of moments where stuff like this happened. Sure, there's plenty of goblins that show up and it kind of gets annoying at times, and some areas can feel a little overly obtuse, but generally speaking, I think the open world is pretty good. Sure, it's not the biggest, but there's a lot of detail here, and you really will be exploring nearly every inch of it if you play through this game. The open world was certainly one of my favorite parts to Dragon's Dogma 2, and I think most people that enjoy the game will agree that, yeah, it's a good open world. Alright, so here we got the first open world game that came out this year. We have Palworld. I'm sure when people are thinking of the best open world games of 2024, Palworld probably isn't coming to mind. But hear me out for a second, I think the open world is actually pretty decent in this game. It is massive, like this is one of the biggest open worlds of the entire year. There's a lot of different places to go. There's tons of islands and they all have different biomes and regions, and what's really great is that pals are exclusive to certain areas. If you want to get certain pals, you might want to go to this kind of region. You might want to go to this island specifically, and it really actually incentivizes you checking out all of this open world so you can try to catch as many different pals as possible. And yes, obviously this is something that Pokemon does as well, but it's never been on this scale. There is no Pokemon game that is anywhere near as big as Palworld. Is it too big? Yeah, probably. There's a lot of dead time, a lot of dead space, and it certainly doesn't feel all that alive in certain areas. But I still think it is a bit impressive how big this open world is. And then of course, because it's a survival game, it's full of different materials and things you'll need to, survive in the game and actually be successful. And so all of that is placed down as well, and yeah, hopefully I made my point even a little here that it is a decent open world. It absolutely could be improved though. I know the game is still in early access technically. We'll see if it ever actually hits 1.0, and if they were going to improve it, I think they should add a lot more towns. I think towns would really be appreciated. Just more random NPCs walking around would be great as well. Make it feel more lived in and just alive versus the only things in this world are trying to kill you, everything is hostile. Yeah, I'd rather have some, friendly NPCs. Sure, there are a few in the game, but we certainly could use more. This one is obviously a bit of a work in progress, but as things stand, it's a decent open world. So here's another open world game that probably doesn't come to mind immediately when you think of the best open worlds in 2024, but it is The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. Despite it being a top-down, or as some people call it, a 2D Zelda game, it actually has a very detailed open world to it that you can freely explore pretty much from the moment you start the game. Once you get out of the castle, you can explore everywhere. And the only thing that really limits you is what echoes you've gotten to that point in the game. Sure, you are supposed to go to certain areas and do certain things, but you can freely explore this open world. There's plenty of side quests, heart containers, and secrets to find. Something else that I really can appreciate is that the game doesn't lock anything off to you. If you want to go check out the final areas in the game, you can go do it. You'll get your ass whooped, but you can go there and start getting some really good echoes pretty much right off the bat. It's very comparable to Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild in that sense, where go wherever you want, solve puzzles however you want. The problem solving in this game is excellent. It's one of the best aspects of this game, and you do plenty of it in the open world. While there have been plenty of open areas in more traditional or 2D Zelda games, I mean the original game to an extent was an open world, they've never been this expansive, this detailed, and have this many things going on. And I think all of this really contributed to the game's overall quality. I think this is a very well designed open world. The level design is interesting, there's a bunch of different biomes, it tries to do different things, and I think that the open world not only does a great job at challenging the player and making them think about problem solving in different ways, but it keeps things really varied, it keeps things interesting. And this is one open world that I really did enjoy my time with. I didn't think I'd enjoy it as much as I did. I was like, oh, I guess that's kind of novel. There's an open world in a 2D Zelda game, but then I was like, no, this is actually pretty good. I guess it matches the rest of the game. Well, from one unconventional open world game to the next, here we have Animal Well. I'm sure Animal Well doesn't exactly strike you as an open world game, but if you've played the game, you would understand that yes, this is technically an open world that you get to explore. Really, from the moment you start, you're just dropped into this huge environment and aren't really given all that much of an objective. You really just kind of explore around. As you're exploring, you'll solve various puzzles, you'll find tons and tons of secrets, you'll get new abilities, then you can go back to older areas with those new abilities and see new parts of the map and uncover even more secrets. The overall map is actually quite large. It looks like a giant ant farm, at least when you zoom out on the map, and there are so many secrets here that it just gets absolutely crazy. Basically every single screen has something secret here. The level design is not only incredibly detailed and intricate, but it's just exceptionally well done. There's no wasted space here, and the game just has an amazing sense of exploration. You'll want to see every square inch of this map. You'll want to find all the secrets, unlock everything. It's really great stuff. I would argue that Animal Well is one of the best Metroidvanias I've ever played, and one of the reasons that it is one of the best is because the level design and the open world is as good as it is. A Metroidvania is almost nothing without its level design, and the level design is king. It is peak in Animal Well, and you really can access so much of it from the beginning of the game, and as you get new abilities, more and more areas unlock, the map becomes bigger and bigger, and before you know it, you've seen the entire game and it's 3 in the morning. Or maybe that was just me. On top of this, the game has an amazing aesthetic. I really love how this game looks, and it just has a certain mood, a vibe, if you will, to it that is unmatched. Animal Well is one of my favorite games all year, and I think it's a great open world game that you might not have actually thought about when thinking about some good open world games. So here we have an open world game that you probably forgot about. Here we have Sandland. This one came out earlier in the year and it was just kind of forgotten almost immediately. This game is based off of the manga of the same name that was by Akira Toriyama, and it absolutely uses its art style. It's a great looking game also. I think this is actually one of the more underrated games of the year, and I feel like this game's already kind of fallen into obscurity, and that's a shame because it's got a pretty decent open world to it. It's actually rather large, there are 2 parts to it, and while it does feel rather lifeless at times, you also gotta understand what Sandland is all about, taking place in the apocalypse. Yeah, it's going to feel a little abandoned here. I wouldn't say it feels as abandoned as like the Mad Max game from about 10 years ago, but for the most part it feels a bit lifeless, but there's plenty of towns, people to see, and enemies to get into scuffles with. There's plenty of side missions in this game, there's lots of collectibles, and you'll find yourself driving around this open world plenty of times. It's probably what you're doing the most of in this game, is driving around the open world. At least the driving is alright in this game. While it isn't the most detailed, and I wouldn't say it's like expertly laid out, you're not going to want to scour every single inch of it, at least it was decently designed. It is actually fun to, you know, explore around, do some of the side quests, collect all of the parts so then you can upgrade your vehicles and make them stronger and faster. That was all pretty good. The open world also gets quite vertical, especially in the second half, and the second half's open world is actually quite different from the first half in a welcoming way. And while speaking on that, this game takes a very different direction in its second half that I absolutely did not see coming. I have no familiarity with the manga or the source material or anything like that, so this was all completely new to me, and yeah, I thought it was actually pretty cool, and it makes the open world even better. While this game certainly isn't going to be winning any awards, I still found the open world to be somewhat enjoyable. So here we have Stalker 2 Heart of Chernobyl. Now, all of the Stalker games outside of the original have had some decently sized open worlds, but Stalker 2 easily has the biggest open world the series has ever seen. And while it isn't the most diverse or varied in terms of its biomes or the general environment, it still is pretty big and impressive. And pretty much the entire game will take place in this large open world that is known as the Zone. The Zone itself has its own personality, attitude, feel, vibe to it. It's kind of hard to describe, but if you've played any of the Stalker games, you know exactly what I'm talking about. These games got a pretty serious atmosphere and a mood that cannot be beat. What I actually really like about Stalker 2's open world is that there's so much to see and pick up. There are so many different caches, stashes, and bunkers filled with hidden trinkets, ammo, supplies, and even some gun parts. Gun parts are like really essential to Stalker 2. They're actually very substantial to all of the firefights, and finding these, it really does feel like a reward, and it just makes the open world feel all the more impactful. I will say though, while it is rather large and there is a lot of detail, there is plenty of downtime where you're just kind of running from one area to the next, and at times I think the open world is too big for its own good. But I still really enjoyed my time with it for the most part. It does feel like a living, breathing open world at times when all of a sudden there's just a bunch of anomalies that show up. Maybe there's a massive storm that comes in, or you see some of the factions actually fighting each other. It's when all this happens that it really does feel like a living, breathing world that doesn't revolve around the player. The player just happens to be in it. There's a lot of weird, crazy shit that just straight up defies the laws of physics. The game also has plenty of great side content to it. The side missions, while they are kind of basic, your rewards are very good, and usually you're going back and forth a bunch on these areas anyway. So what's a little pit stop? That in the open world is actually kind of challenging. It can totally wipe the floor with you. While I wouldn't say Stalker 2 is all that difficult of a game when it comes to the survival elements, the gunfights can seriously end you fast. Regardless of all of this, Stalker 2's open world really is one of a kind, even when compared to the other Stalker games, and I really enjoyed it. Alright, so here we got maybe the big MF of open world games all year. We have Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. While Final Fantasy VII Rebirth doesn't have like one massive open world, it actually has several large open worlds to it. And all I really gotta say is, man, there is a lot to this game. When I mean a lot, I mean more than just about any other game that came out this year. There is so much to see and do in these open worlds. Every single one is pretty different from the last in terms of how it looks and how you'll get around. Sure, you do plenty of similar things, and at times the open world activities do feel like busy work, I won't lie to you, but I actually did find it fun busy work for the most part. There's also plenty of minigames, which I know that some people are not a fan of, but I actually really like a lot of the minigames, and while some of these areas might feel a little too big for their own good, for the most part I think these open areas are actually really well designed, and this was some of the most fun I had in any open world in 2024. It just always felt like there was so many things to see in these open worlds, whether it was all of the minigames, whether it was some of the side quests, some of the collectibles, doing all of the outposts. There really is a lot to see here, and I really wanted to see as much of it as I possibly could. This was one of those games where I was going out of my way to try to do everything, and it's actually pretty rewarding for the most part. Despite all of this, I'm not going to act like the open world is just this masterclass of design. There's plenty of areas where I'm just like, oh, this kind of just feels thrown together, or it's a little too big for its own good and it takes a while to get across, but for the most part, I think this is some really good shit. It also looks amazing. I mean, the game is a real looker. Even without the PS5 Pro, this is a great looking game. The open world looks excellent. And while I'm certain there are plenty of people that would have preferred the game to be a lot more linear like Final Fantasy VII Remake, that's just not really possible with this game, especially if you've played the original, and it's really cool to see just how much they've expanded on the original game's open world. I think a lot of people sometimes forget how open the original Final Fantasy VII would get. It is rather linear in where you're supposed to go next, but there was a lot of exploration in that open world as well, especially for the time. And this, it just feels like that on crack. Like, there is no exaggeration, over 100 hours worth of content in this game if you want to explore every nook and cranny and try to do everything in the open world. Like, it can feel a bit endless at times or even daunting, but it's one of those scenarios where I think it is actually worth it and it does add to the game. Or you can ignore it all and just stick to the main story. There's nothing wrong there. Either way, I think you're gonna have a good time. Alright, so here we got a game that I debated on even including on this list. I went pretty back and forth about it, but at the end of the day, I did include it, and that is Rise of the Ronin. Now, Rise of the Ronin is a little bit of a mixed bag in my opinion. While I think the combat is really good, and it really is a lot of fun, the open world itself is pretty middling. It feels really flat, it's basic, and it feels kind of like from a bygone era. It feels more like a 360 map, and so you're probably like, so why are you including it on a best open world games list? Because there is some merit to it. There are some highlights when you climb the tall thing and fly around. It is actually kind of fun. There is a bit of variety with these environments, and it's not like stupidly big either. It is pretty large, and there's actually a few different open worlds you go to, but none of them take an eternity to get across, and at the very least, there's a lot to do in Rise of the Ronin. If you stick to just like the main story, you could probably finish it in like 20 or 25 hours, but if you start doing all of the open world activities, all the side content, going for the collectibles, man, you could double, maybe triple that. There is just a hell of a lot to this open world. Like, this game has content. It has content in spades. Is it the best content? Maybe not, but if you like the combat, then you're probably going to like most of the content. The combat is really good in this game. It's satisfying, it's challenging, and doing parries does feel really nice. It's really what carries this entire game. I wouldn't have wanted to spend like any time in this open world if the combat wasn't as good as it is. And so yeah, I did spend a decent amount of time in this open world. I would say this is probably the weakest open world game on the list, and I would have a hard time recommending its open world compared to some of these other games, but it wasn't awful, it wasn't atrocious. And look, it was either this or Squirrel with a Gun, and yeah, I'd rather have Rise of the Ronin. It certainly could have been worse is what I'm trying to say. So the last open world game we have for today is Star Wars Outlaws. You knew I couldn't have an open world games list and not include a Ubisoft game. Well, it was either this or Skull and Bones, and yeah, Star Wars Outlaws is a significantly better game than Skull and Bones. And its open world is just significantly better than anything Skull and Bones had. Skull and Bones' open world was just flat out terrible. Star Wars Outlaws, while I don't think it's amazing or exceptionally designed, I still think it is actually good. There's a few different planets you get to be on. They're all decently varied and diverse from each other. The game actually does look very good. You can get around them pretty fast with the speeder, and there's a lot of activities here. Yeah, it is kind of the cookie cutter, copy and paste, typical Ubisoft open world nonsense that we've all become kind of sick of, but hey, at least there's a lot of content here, and if you like Star Wars, you'll probably like some of this. I will say though, out of all the Ubisoft games I've played recently, this one might do the best job at feeling like a living, breathing open world, especially when you're in any of the cities. There's just so much life, there's so many NPCs, and you feel like you're actually transported to a world. It's kind of like when you go to Disneyland if you've gone to the Star Wars land, similar kind of vibe. At least it was for me. When you're outside of the cities, yeah, it's not the most exciting, but for the most part, I think they actually do a good job at making it feel just lived in, and I can really appreciate that. You're not going to see me saying that about several other open world Ubisoft games like Skull and Bones, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, or even that Avatar game. Actually, I would say that Star Wars Outlaws has a better open world than all three of the games I just mentioned. There's actually some enjoyment to be had here. I actually had some fun. While I haven't finished Star Wars Outlaws yet and I still am playing through it, I really would like to actually finish this one. This is probably one of the better Ubisoft games I've played in a while outside of Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. That game is so good, but it's not an open world game, so it doesn't get to be on this list. Either way, Star Wars Outlaws, it's got a pretty alright open world. And that's it for today's video. It wasn't super long, but we were just talking about some open worlds. What were your favorite open world games of 2024? Was it on here? Did I miss it? Let me know down below. If you made it to this part of the video though, maybe you should comment our code word. Today's code word is going to be something a little different. Today it's going to be Kirby. I don't know why. I kind of am feeling like playing some Kirby. I'm not going to do it, but I really want to play some Kirby. It's just the mood I'm in, you know? Sometimes you get in that mood and you just want to play a certain series. I'm rambling at this point. My throat is getting really sore. I've been recording videos all day. So, hope you all have a wonderful night, day, evening, whatever it is. Stay safe, y'all. Bye-bye.